Good morning, everybody. It's Jean here, coming to you from my sewing room. This is Jean's Block Party 2019, and I have finished my blocks 5 and 6. And I've said it before, but I have to reiterate that when I'm calling them block 5 or 6, it doesn't mean, you beginners, I had to explain this to Jen, that we're putting block 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a row. That doesn't mean that. Maybe you guys knew that already. I don't know. But Jen didn't. Last year when Jen started, she's like, oh, okay, so block 1 goes next to block 2. And I'm like, no. After we have the 20 blocks, last year was 20 blocks. I'm like, you put them wherever you want. It's funny that. I think I'm going to try somehow to do an applique. Maybe even a little bit different than last year, which was just a raw edge heart. Again, I haven't had time to sort out my web page to get photographs, so just bear with me, and to get like a design. And also, since I've been doing my elephant's quilt, people were saying, can you do a simple paper pieced, foundation pieced block? Which again, it would have to be a pattern on the computer that you could print out. I'll have to figure, we got time to do both an applique and a pattern, a foundation pattern, but that's for later on. I'll have plenty of time. This week we are going to be doing half square triangles. If you don't know what that means, this is our block, one of our blocks here, which this is a half square triangle. You're like, oh no, how do I get that? But I explain it. What do I say? Your 1/4 inch seam, very important. And even if you've done it, I did it really perfectly, and I'm about 2 threads out, whatever. So don't sweat it. Don't be taking stuff out. Don't be ripping stuff out. Do it like you do it. Do it properly. Do it nice. And if it's within a hair, you're fine. Or maybe if you want to mess about with it, but I didn't. I don't mess about with it. So here it is. Here's our pinwheel block. You have to be careful of the orientation of your darks. This takes 2 fabrics, a dark and a light, to obviously create some contrast. So even if you're doing scraps, which a lot of you are, maybe you just want to have a neutral, 4 different scraps, but then in neutral, so you can actually see your pinwheel. So that is a basic half square triangle. That's our one block. And here's our second block, which is utilizing 5 smaller half square triangles, and then a large focal fabric. So again, just 2 patterns, 2 fabrics, 2 different fabrics for this block. Again, we're concentrating on how to make the half square triangles. The method I'm using is that I'm teaching you now is to mark with a pen and a ruler. You'll see that, and to sew precisely. So these are our 2 blocks. Now let me see. I wasn't doing this last week, but I did it last year. I did this one I did have to slice off maybe that was why the point didn't match. I had to slice off a little hair. Awesome. So there's my 9.5 inch block and my 9.5 inch block. Pretty good. I'm very, very pleased. So how many of you have gotten this? Hopefully you've gotten this. This little square, I find it real handy for a lot of things. So yeah, so these are our 2 blocks for this week. I hope you're enjoying this. I am. If you have any specific questions, you can always leave them in the comments. I do answer my comments for the most part. Yeah, so this is it. We're doing half square triangles this week. And maybe next week too, to try to get them under our belt. Just some different configurations. I'll see. I haven't even thought about what I'm having for lunch, let alone next week. Anyway, I'm enjoying this. I hope you guys are too. Tutorial to follow for our 2 blocks. Block 5 and block 6. So, block 5 and block 6. So, hope you enjoy it, folks. Thanks a lot. Okay, see ya. This week, we are concentrating on our half square triangles to make pinwheel block. So now what I have chosen here is because I'm having to cut a unit larger, a couple of them larger than my 10-inch squares, I'm using fat quarters, and I have pulled from my my fat quarter over there. And when you're doing this pinwheel block, excuse me, you're going to want to have a real nice contrast of your fabric. So I have chosen this lovely dark red and this lovely creamy print, creamy white print. And I'm, again, a fat quarter. Now, fat quarters, as you know, come approximately 22 by 18. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using the 18-inch side here as opposed to the larger 20-inch size over there. And I'm going to be, oops, I got to get my other ruler out from over here. Oh, excuse me, it's under my tripod. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to open up both of these because we're going to be cutting the exact same size block for this, or the same exact unit for this block. So I'm just sort of going to scratch them together the best I can, lining them up on my board, and then with my longer ruler, I'm just going to trim off the edge here, just to make sure that my edges are really nice and straight there. Oops, that wasn't in the frame. Sorry about that. So yeah, here I am. So I've just trimmed off that edge. Now again with my, so this is nice and straight. Again, I have my long rule because this is, I need this, my 24-inch ruler because these are my fat quarters, because I can't use my my layer cakes, my 10-inch squares, because I'm going to be needing a piece of fabric that is 5 3/8 inch square. Now 5 3/8 inch square on your ruler is, let me see if I can do this here. There's my here's my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's half an inch. 5 1/2 is 5 4/8. So we want the line right before 5 1/2. That's 5 1 2 3/8. The line right before the 1/2 inch. 5 3/8. So I'm going to put my ruler down. You see, yes, I'm in the frame. I'm going to put my ruler down and I'm going to find that 5 3/8 inch line. I'm going to find it here. I'm going to find it there. That's why I like my rulers, because now I'm doing a bigger cut on my fat quarter, and I can go bottom. Let me just get this over here. As you can see, I can go from the top to the bottom to measure this piece, which 2 pieces here, my light and my dark, which you've scratched together. I've cleaned up that edge. I found my 5 3/8 inch bottom and top. Very carefully, I hold my ruler here. I open my rotary cutter, and very carefully and firmly and slowly I make my cut and close my rotary cutter. Now I can just put these away because I'm not going to be needing these. But what I'm going to do is I am going to turn this around here, find a nice straight line on my mat. I'm going to just tidy up this bottom edge because I scratched them together, but I really want these to be nice and square. So I'm going to just tidy up that edge. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to be cutting 2 each 5/8 inch square. There's my 5 3/8 inch. 5 3/8 inch square. And then I come up and it's exactly 5 3/8 inch square. There to there. It's a beautiful square on my ruler. Down here is straight across. Up here is straight across. I remove that. I open my cutter. I make my cut. I do the exact same thing. I'm going to take this over here. Find my 5 3/8 inch square. It's here, it's there. I'm going to open my cutter, hold my ruler firmly, and there's my 4 pieces of fabric that I need. Now, what we want to do is to make our half square triangles. There's 2 schools of thought. What you can do is, I used to do this, but a lot of people do it another way, and I'm going to show you more of the traditional way to mark. Let me see if I can find a pen here. Here's my pen. Yeah. So now what you want to do is, well, I'm going to do it on the lighter side of my fabric, okay? I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm going to mark with a nice marking pen or a pencil. I'm going to go from the very tip of one end diagonally to the other tip of my fabric. I'm going to hold that on there, and I'm going to draw a line, just a faint line. Hopefully my pen, yeah, there we go. So there, if you can see my line that I've drawn, and I'm going to do it on this one, on my lighter piece. Diagonal, right to the corner, very important. So just start there. My pen's flowing a bit better now. You don't have to worry, because this bit's going to be getting cut off, because if you're a beginner, you're thinking, oh, why am I drawing on my fabric? But you don't have to worry about that. Now, what I want us to do is I want you to put pretty right sides of our block together. They're exactly the same size. Scratch them together. They're exactly the same size. We've cut them perfectly. And then what I want you to do, excuse me, you're going to secure this with a couple pins here on either side of this drawn line. Scratch them together. And then, oops, that pin is so messed up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this over to our sewing machine, and I will show you. We're going to take this unit over to our sewing machine, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch away from that line. Exactly 1/4 inch away from the marked line. You're going to go down one side and then down the other side on both units, and you have to be very careful to get your 1/4 inch seam correct. So I'll meet you over at my sewing machine. Over at my machine, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sewing a 1/4 inch away from that marked line on this unit. Now I know where my 1/4 inch line is, my 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to put on this one, I'm going to put my presser foot on this edge, because I know to my needle that that's going to be a perfect 1/4 inch. And I'm going to start I'm going to start sewing very quick, very smoothly and slowly, my 1/4 inch away from that line. And I will go off this one. I won't do the next one. I'll finish that. I'll put my needle up. I'll put my presser foot up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn this around, pull that out a bit, tuck that into, and then do the exact same thing. Very carefully place my 1/4 inch foot right on that line, and then right down. And off. And I will just pull that out and clip my threads, and I'll do the exact same thing with my next unit. 1/4 inch. You will, even at beginners, you will now be beginning to realize just how important your 1/4 inch is to make your beautiful units, to make your beautiful squares, your blocks. Right to the edge, my needle is down, my presser foot is up. I'm just pulling it out gently to get that tail. Tuck that back under. Put it right back down. And right down 1/4 inch away from that marked line. Go nice and slow. Presser foot up. And I'll trim my things. Now, I'll trim these over here. Trim all my things. Now, take my pins out, and I'll meet you back at my cutting table. I've sewn my units together, and now what you're going to be doing, very, very carefully, you're going to be putting your straight edge, your ruler, on the marked line that you've drawn. You've drawn your marked line now. Now we're going to cut on that line. You're going to open your rotary cutter, hold your ruler. Close that. My ruler is right on the line between those two seams. So I'm going to cut carefully between those two seams on both of my units on the marked line. Line that up. Now we have 4 half square triangles. Look at that. We have 4 beautiful units that's going to make up my pinwheel block. What I'm going to do now is very carefully, because you want to be very careful, this is on the bias, which means this bit stretches a little bit. This bit here, on that line, that will stretch. So very carefully, what are you going to do? You're going to go over to your ironing board with your dark sides up, and you're going to press these seams. Remember, you're going to set your seams, very important. And then very carefully lifting up your dark, because that's how you want to do it. You're going to roll that dark side without stretching it. You're going to just nudge that dark side right up to the top there, and you're going to press that seam beautifully on all 4 units. So I'm going to go do that now. I have brought my camera over just so you can see. I'm not saying you're dumb or anything, but I just want you to see how very important it is not to get this unit out of square. It's easy to do because this is on the bias. So I've set all my seams, and again, I'm just going to pull that. I'm not pulling anything, and I'm nudging. I'm just nudging. Don't do it fast because it can get very skewed fairly quickly, and you won't have a nice square block to work with. I am pressing my seams to the dark side, even on this block. Hopefully it'll work, because a lot of people press this seam open on a pinwheel, but I don't. I press it to the dark. And I make sure, very, very careful, that I'm not pressing or ironing my bits skewed. Very important. And again, I choose to do this way, gently but firmly. Other people choose to go up and down, whatever your preference is. In quilting, there's a ton of ways to do a ton of different things, and everybody gets comfortable doing it their own way. Oh, I wanted to tell you, I usually mark my bit. Remember when we did this with a line? I usually just fold it in half and make a fold line, and then I sew on either side of the fold line. But again, that's a shortcut that I will do. But this is for, like, I want you to mark it so you're really sure of that line. So now I'm going to go back over to the cutting mat. We've created our 4 half square triangle blocks. Now, these on the edge here, you're going to say, oh, this piece of fabric's hanging out. That's called a dog ear in quilting. You can just take your rotary cutter and just cut them off square. Just cut that little dog ear off. Make sure you keep that little tiny triangle, your rotary cutter, nice and square to your block. And just cut off these little dog ears. A little bit easier. Some people don't cut them off. I didn't used to, and then I thought, well, some people do, so I started doing it. Just that little tiny bit. As you can see in quilting, sometimes just even that little tiny bit. You see this? That little tiny bit can make the world of difference. So now what we have here is we have our 4 units, and we're doing a 4 patch, right? Okay, but now what we want to do, and this is the exciting part, we're going to put this in our pinwheel shape. Okay, so now this is where you have to be very careful of your orientation. So if you have to, refer back to this bit of the video where your orientation for your pinwheel is. So there, whoops, there is our block. There's my pinwheel block, right? Awesome. Now, it's a 4 patch, but you're saying, oh, all of those points in the middle. Well, what we're going to be doing is you're going to be very carefully you're going to be very carefully doing exactly like our 4-patch. You're going to take this one over to here, and you will see when you take this pretty side to pretty side, you will see if you've sewn it and you've ironed it perfectly correctly, that those seams right there are going to do what? They're going to nest. They are going to nest. So you're going to put a pin in there, and you're going to put a pin up here, and look how perfectly they've been done. You're going to bring this one over, keeping your orientation proper. You're going to sort of scratch them together. You're going to find out where those two seams nest. Right there. You're going to put a pin there. And then this is our center seam, right? We're going to come over to our sewing machine, and we're going to stitch right down that center seam, just like you've done on a regular 4-patch. I've taken my 2 sewn units over to my machine, and I have stitched down here, and I have stitched here, this center seam. I've gone over and I've set my seams, and I very carefully have pressed to the dark side, this seam to the dark side, and this seam to the dark side. Now we're going to turn them around. Remember our orientation. Be careful of our orientation. Dark side, dark side. Now, if you've done it absolutely properly, slowly. Oh, one thing I do want to remember. When I sewed this seam, just as it was, remember I put my pin in here, and then I put my pin in here and here. I like to start not at the seam edge, okay? So this one's fine. I started at the top edge and went down to the seam. But if you remember, I put my pin in here. What I did is when I got to my machine, I brought it over that way, and I stitched down to the seam. I didn't want to start at that seam. But here we open everything up. Everything has been all nice and stitched. And what are you going to have if you've done it perfectly? You're going to have from this point on both pieces your beautiful 1/4 of an inch. Right? Your beautiful 1/4 of an inch. So then, what do we have here? We have a simple 4-patch. You're going to bring the pretty side over to the pretty side. Excuse me. And that seam there, don't worry about it. If you've done everything properly, scratch it together. That seam there, those 4 little points, dark light, will just match beautifully. So what I do, usually I just put a pin right in the middle, if I can get it in there, because it's a big seam. And then I put a pin, just like our other 4-patches, on that side, scratch them together, and then I put a pin up here. And I'm going to go over very carefully, and then when you get to this point, you can see where those stitches are. So you don't want to have it bigger than a 1/4 of an inch. You don't want to have it smaller than a 1/4 of an inch. So hopefully when I go over and I stitch this middle seam, my points will match. So here is my finished block. I've stitched that seam, I've pressed it, I've set it, and I've sewn my middle seam. I'm a hair out there, 1 thread. Who cares? It's wonderful. Looks beautiful. Oh, let me just see. So now I'm a hair out on my, so I'm just a sliver. Isn't that interesting? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 9.5 inch ruler here, and it's, again, this is called squaring up. I'm okay there. I'm in the center here. It's interesting that I just have a little tiny sliver on that side to square up my block. But there is my beautiful 2-toned pinwheel block made with half square triangles. So that, folks, is just lovely. I think it's beautiful. So now on to the next block.